Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Bani Israel, chapter 17, and we will go through verses 101 to 105. Human unbridled desires create imbalance in the world. It is a fairly general title I have given to today's presentation. There are a number of important points covered in our talk. These are the references, and this is our contact in case anyone wishes to raise any query, question, or any points regarding our previous presentations. Recap of verses 96 to 100. What the messenger and his companions did as a Jamaat under the guidance of Wahi is related back to Allah in the Quran. This provides continuous assurance to the Mu'mineen that they have the protection of the laws of Allah. Both guidance and going astray is according to the law of Allah. If people do not accept the guidance of the Quran, then essentially they lose all the potential benefits associated with this guidance. This means that their self will not develop and they will remain in an undeveloped state, which will lead to absence of benefits of the life of the hereafter. Not considering the possibility of another life beyond death means that man does not hold himself accountable. It also means that man lives his life without the choice of the hereafter, and as a result, such a self never acquires that attribute which is necessary for the next life. If there is no continuation of human life beyond death, then this whole creation becomes meaningless. All human deeds go to waste. Then the Quran states that all the treasures of Allah are made available according to prescribed laws. These resources are meant for the whole of mankind and must not be retained in just a few hands. An overview of today's presentation. By referring to the tussle between Pharaoh and Musa, here the Quran has reminded us that the confrontation between Batil and Haqq is nothing new. The tale of the history of mankind presents clear evidence of the functioning of the law of requital of Allah. When nations resort to inequities and injustices, clear signs of their wrong path appear before their eyes, but they do not wish to take notice of these. Next, the same thing happened in the case of the destruction of Pharaoh and his people. Signs did appear before them, which were the consequences of their ill deeds. But despite the warning from the messenger Musa, Pharaoh ignored these signs. Instead, Pharaoh accused the messenger Musa of using deception and lies as a consequence. Pharaoh and his cohorts were drowned through their own error of judgment. Bani Israel became established in the land after the demise of Pharaoh, but they were also warned not to transgress the laws of Allah, otherwise they too will suffer destruction. Despite this warning, they also resorted to disobedience and hence suffered destructions. And of course, this happened over a period of time. Now the Quran is made available to provide guidance on all of these aspects. It gives a warning in the event of disobedience to it and gives glad tidings if people follow it. Now what I've done over here, I've taken an excerpt from the book Islam, A Challenge to Religion, and it is on Iman. A few words on the necessity of Iman and on its organic relation to reason will not be out of place at this point. Without it, man is like a boat without a rudder, drifting aimlessly and at the mercy of every gust of wind. With it, he is carried forward step by step to the objective of self-fulfillment and self-realization. To the question, Iman in what? The answer can only be Iman in Allah who sustains the universe, which reveals a few of the infinity of his aspects, Iman in the reality of the human self, and in its unlimited capacity for development. I thought this is a very nice statement which sums up the position of human self. That is, it has unlimited capacity for development and the Quran helps us to develop it. Iman in the absolute values which set the goal to both human endeavor and cosmic process. and finally Iman in a purposive universe. In the mind of man, the Quran seeks to implant Iman in life and the renewal of life after death. Of course, Quran can only help to implant Iman if man wants this Iman himself. Now we go to the first verse of today's presentation. There are signs in the account of Bani Israel. وَلَقَدْ أَتَيْنَا مُوسَى تِسْعَ آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ فَاسْأَلْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ إِذْ جَاءَهُمْ فَقَالَ لَهُ فِرْعَوْنُ إِنِّي لَا أَظُنُّكَ يَا مُوسَى مَسْحُورًا. This is precisely the difference in mentalities due to which these people are opposing you so much. Say to them that if they wish to understand what the consequence of this opposition to you will be, then cast an eye on the tales of the former nations for this, especially the clash between Pharaoh and the messenger Musa, which has been mentioned many times already. Before the final destruction of the people of Pharaoh, we had given 9 clear signs to Musa. If these people wish to confirm this, say to them that they can inquire about this from Bani Israel. When the messenger Musa came to the people of Pharaoh, after listening to everything said to him, Pharaoh declared, that which you assert that you are a messenger from Allah, in this matter, either you are deceived yourself or you deceive others. Further reflections on this verse, continuing from previous verses where assurance was provided regarding the treasures of Allah and their equitable distribution under the system of Deen, here the Quran has again referred to the tussle between Pharaoh and the messenger Musa in order to remind us not be overwhelmed by the system of Batil. Batil is always on a very weak footing, and we know Batil means all those systems which produce destructive results. They might appear to be producing constructive results in a short term, but if we have a look at these over a long period of time, then they are not good for humanity at large. And as and when Haqq arrives, this system starts to fragment itself as per the law of Allah. The Quran has guided us here that when human systems based on relative values start to decline, then this does not occur overnight. Not at all. There is a fairly prolonged time for this decline, which precedes the total elimination of the effectiveness of the system of Batil, i.e., powerful nations decline gradually. Referring to Pharaoh and his people, the Quran has mentioned 9 clear signs, which include the signs of their decline, which appeared among them, and Musa draws their attention to these to warn them of their wrong path. It is simply not possible that we follow wrong paths in life and their evil results do not appear at some point in time, because these all follow cause and effect, and the law of Requital ensures that the wrong consequences of our deeds manifest according to the time scale built within these deeds. Expanding this verse a bit further, the Quran has referred to some of these signs in another verse. فَأَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِمُ الطُّوفَانَ وَالْجَرَادَ وَالْقُمَّلَ وَالضَّفَادِعَ وَالدَّامَ آيَاتٍ مُفَصَّلَاتٍ فَاسْتَكْبَرُوا وَكَانُوا قَوْمًا مُجْرِمِينَ. We will share its meanings from Mafhum al-Quran. They were visited by calamities. Pests in crops caused destruction. There was an excess of frogs. Diseases appeared causing blood disorders. All these were evident signs of this fact that when the system of the state is not on correct lines, such conditions become created over there, and those in power are so busy in their luxuries and hedonistic acts that they do not have time to pay attention to this. Despite these kinds of troubles facing the people, the ruling class does not abstain from their transgressions. Indeed, that was a party of criminals. Whatever was taking place in the land was the consequence of these very crimes. So these did not come from nowhere. These were because of what people were doing in that country or in that land. We can easily relate the contents of this verse to the conditions existing in various countries in the world of 2024. For example, the most powerful nation, the US, is rapidly declining due to its external and internal policies based on Batil. And the signs of destruction are staring their ruling elite in the face, but they are ignoring all this. Why do they do this? Now, continuing, wherever the Quran points to these effects, it also outlines the causes which are related to the human psyche. For example, it states that whatever kind of outer world you wish to create, and we have gone through this verse number of times before, Inna Allaha la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah does not change the state of a nation until they change what is within their own self. Whatever choices we make, the law of requital ensures that their effects materialize in the outer physical world. With reference to 9 signs mentioned here, these include the message of Wahi communicated to Pharaoh. And this is noted in another verse. وَأَدْخِلْ يَدَاكَ فِي جِيبِكَ تَخْرُجْ بَيْضًا مِنْ غَيْرِ سُوءٍ فِي تِسْعِ آيَاتٍ إِلَى فِرْعَوْنَ وَقَوْمِهِ إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَوْمًا فَاسِقِينَ. Now put your hand into thy bosom, and this is the messenger Musa is being addressed, and it will come out white without stain. These are among the 9 signs to Pharaoh and his people, for they are a people rebellious in transgression. And it is metaphorically used over here that the messenger Musa, he presented the salient points of Wahi to Pharaoh and his people. We need not become distracted by trying to count these 9 signs, since the issue before us is to understand the conduct of those nations which fail to follow the guidance of the Quran. And this includes all nations which call themselves Muslims. And if we Google these 9 signs, all these are listed over there. So my own view is that we don't have to go into these details, but if you look through all the verses which relate to Pharaoh and the struggle with the Bani Israel, then these things become very clear. Now, next verse, guidance is for those who look for it. قَالَ لَقَدْ عَلِمْتَ مَا أَنزَلَ هَؤُلَاءِ إِلَّا رَبُّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ بَصَائِرَ وَإِنِّي لَا أَظُنُّكَ يَا فِرْعَوْنُ مَسْبُورًا. Musa said to him that you have certainly grasped this reality in your heart, that these clear reasonings, these laws and codes which I have presented before you have not been sent down on me other than from Allah of the heavens and the earth. You say about me that I have somehow been deceived, but what I observe is that you yourself are suffering from self-deception. Since the destruction is hovering above your head, and you, O Pharaoh, are encircled by it in every direction, and you do not see it. Further elaboration of this verse. The verse commences with a firm declaration by the messenger Musa to Pharaoh that the message he has conveyed is well understood by him. And since this message is conveyed by pointing to the ground reality of the system established by him and is undeniable, if this is not accepted, then there are going to be consequences for him and his unjust regime. In other verses of the Quran, the injustices of Pharaoh are highlighted. For example, in one of the verses, Inna Pharaoh ala fil ardi wa ja'ala ahlaha shi'an. Truly Pharaoh elated himself in the land and divided his people into parties. So according to the Quran, dividing people into parties to serve your own ends, that is divide and rule, is a very heinous crime against humanity. And it has consequences. And we can see the problem of these divisions in the world of today. In another verse, he goes a step further and declares, فَقَالَ أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. He declared, I am your Rabb most high, thereby leaving no doubt who controls all the means of sustenance and nourishment in the land. This also explains an aspect of the attribute of Rabb. And all those people who are rich and powerful and control the governments, they also control the means of sustenance. And as a result, keep their public and people under subjugation. Now, continuing on this verse, in another verse, Pharaoh reminds his people in order to impress upon the messenger, وَنَادَى فِرْعَوْنُ فِي قَوْمِهِ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ أَلَيْسَ لِي مُلْكُ مِصْرَ وَهَٰذِهِ الْأَنْهَارُ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِي أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And Pharaoh, because he declared that he holds all the means of sustenance, then he elaborated it by giving an example. And Pharaoh proclaimed among his people, saying, O my people, does not the dominion of Egypt belong to me, these streams flowing underneath me? What see you not them? That don't you see that all these lands and everything in it, including your own self, are under my control, under my authority? But all this did not hinder the messenger an iota. And this is an important point, that despite all this power of his, the messenger and those people who were with him, not everyone probably, and we can see that from today's word as well, but they stick to their aim and convey the message and organize the people. And he and his brother communicated the message of Allah, and he continued his efforts unabatedly in the land. Because they were convinced that this man-made system under Pharaoh is unacceptable, and we want a better system, that system which is put forward by the wahi of Allah. We need to keep in mind that the people of Egypt were aware of the guidance of Allah, as noted in another place. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ يُوسُفُ مِنْ قَبْلُ بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ فَمَا زِلْتُمْ فِي شَكٍّ مِمَّا جَاءَكُمْ بِهِ. From the lips of a moment in the court of Pharaoh, and he said, and to you there came Yusuf in times gone by with clear signs, but you ceased not to doubt that for which he had come. And our situation is quite similar, because we have the Quran and we know the message is there, but still we are not inclined to follow it. Towards the end of the verse, it is stated, وَإِنِّي لَا ظُنُّكَ يَا فِرْعَوْنُ مَسْبُورًا. And I consider you indeed, O Pharaoh, to be one doomed to destruction. Note how important it is to warn people in power. And this is important, that we should warn people and clearly and firmly that the path they have adopted is going to take them to destruction. Now, next verse, 17:103, rejecting the guidance of the Quran leads to self-destruction. فَأَرَادَ أَنْ يَسْتَفِزَّهُمْ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ فَأَغْرَقْنَهُ وَمَنْ مَعَهُ جَمِيعًا. At this, Pharaoh resorted to using those same machinations of the Mulukiyat which are frequently employed among tyrannical rulers. His objective was to undermine Bani Israel in such a way that their feet become destabilized, and so that it would become impossible for them to live there. But its consequence was that we drowned him and his cohorts. Further reflections on this verse. Next, the Quran has skipped over details spread over many years where the messenger Musa and Bani Israel struggled to deal with the man-made system of Pharaoh and his cronies. This aspect is covered in a number of other verses in various chapters of the Quran. From the Quran, it appears that the confrontation with Pharaoh went through various phases. Initially, the messenger conveyed the message of guidance to him so that he may agree to change the way he was governing in the land. Pharaoh realized that the message is such that if it is acted upon, it will lead to the elimination of his rule in the land, and he's not going to give it up very easily. قَالَ جِئْتَنَا لِتُخْرِجَنَا مِنْ أَرْضِنَا بِسِحْرِكَ يَا مُوسَى. And Quran has pointed to this fact. Pharaoh said, have you come to drive us out of our land with your deception, O Musa? Why should someone listen to and accept the guidance of Allah when one has got into power through injustice and tyranny? And this is an important point for us as students of the Quran, that people who acquire this power, we should never ever expect them to come to the Quran, because all their efforts are to satisfy their own desire for power. The whole point of getting into power is to exploit other human beings, and hence the reply of Pharaoh was, وَقَالُوا أَنُؤْمِنُ لِبَشَرَيْنِ مِثْلِنَا وَقَوْمُهُمَا لَنَا عَابِدُونَ. I've highlighted this word Iman over here, Anomino, because they had firm conviction. And this is where we should know that these people who do not follow or do not wish to follow the path of the Quran, they are also fully convinced of their own aim and their own objectives. They, that is Pharaoh and his cohort, said, shall we believe in two men like ourselves? Very important point, that why should we believe in human beings who are weak and are leading people who are slaves? So that position of strength gives them arrogance, and their people are subject to us. Continuing on this verse, as noted in this verse, Pharaoh got tired of the messenger and now wished to deal with the issue with force, i.e. to eliminate him, thinking that the problem will then go away. This means that the messenger, despite being weak in terms of material resources, had rattled him ideologically. And that is very important, that when the message of Wahi is passed on to people, it does unsettle them. And over a long period of time, as people who are following the Wahi, they become stronger and stronger, then things start to materialize in the outer world. Here in the verse, it is stated that he became determined to eliminate this thorn in his side. And I've quoted over here another verse, وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنُ ذَرُونِي أَقْتُلْ مُوسَى وَلْيَدْعُ رَبَّهُ إِنِّي أَخَافُ أَنْ يُبَدِّلَ دِينَكُمْ أَوْ أَنْ يُظْهِرَ فِي الْأَرْضِ الْفَسَادَ. Said Pharaoh, leave me to slay Musa and let him call his Rabb. Very interesting thing. See the language of threat which the Quran has noted. What I fear is lest he should change your deen, or lest he should cause mischief to power in the land. So people who are in a position of power, it is very difficult, rather impossible for them to give up. He knew that with the leader gone, Bani Israel will not be able to do anything. We can relate this to events in today's world. Then the Quran describes that the outcome of this whole struggle was spread over many years and states, فَأَغْرَقْنَهُ وَمَّعَهُ جَمِيعًا. But we did drown him or all who were with him. Understanding the law of requital helps in the cause of Allah. In relation to the first part of the verse, the Quran has pointed to this aspect in another verse. And I will go through the meaning of this. And we made a people considered weak, the inheritor of lands in both the east and west, lands whereon we sent down blessings. The fair promise of your Rabb was fulfilled for Bani Israel because they had patience and constancy. And we leveled to the ground the great works and fine buildings which Pharaoh and his people erected. And we can go through verses before this verse and after this, and we will see that the whole picture comes very clear before us. In the second part of the verse, the decline of Bani Israel is noted, which led to their destruction due to abandoning the path of Allah. This aspect was covered in some detail under verses 5 to 7 previously. We can relate these verses to the condition of the Muslims over many centuries. They can rectify their condition by coming to the Quran and regain their success and prosperity which came to them in the initial era of Islam. So it is not something which is not known to the Muslims of today. They know about it and they do talk about it as well. But the task which they have to do is come to the Quran and then from the pure Quran work towards the establishment of the system of deen. And that means they will have to give up their existing practices which are not bearing any fruit and they are unsuccessful. Now go to the next verse, 104. Bani Israel benefited by obeying the guidance of Allah. وَقُلْنَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ أَسْكُنُوا الْأَرْضَ فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ الْآخِرَةِ جِئْنَا بِكُمْ لَفِيفًا. And after that, it was said to Bani Israel to go and live in the land in peace and tranquility, that is in the land of Palestine. After this, your severe destruction will occur twice. The second destruction will be so universal that you will be gathered together from every direction and will be slaughtered. Together with this, they were also told that after this destruction, you will again be given a chance for reformation when our last messenger will come If you accept Iman in him, then you will again obtain new life. So everything follows laws, and they were explained that how the law of requital functions, and they ignored it. Further elaboration of this verse, we know that Bani Israel, under the direction of the messenger, left Egypt and went into the Sinai for many years to receive education and training in the establishment of the system of Deen. However, this episode of their collective life initially did not go very well. Once the new younger generation became strong, then they became established in the land which is today's Palestine. Here in the verse, the Quran has not gone into these details as they are covered in other verses. It appears that they did establish the system within the guidelines of the Wahi of Allah, and they were warned not to transgress its values, otherwise they will go astray and will suffer as a result. Historically as well, there are reports that they prospered and were very successful, and they multiplied, and then they started to go wrong. Here in the verse, it is firstly mentioned that they got power in the land and remained in peace and security for a period of time. However, as appears to happen with all nations, people gradually forget the values which provided them with success and prosperity and begin to go against these values. Just see how Allah has related it towards his laws. And when Allah is related to himself in these verses, it means that it is according to his laws. Following is the cause for destruction of nations. Now, over here again, I have taken some excerpts from Islam, a challenge to religion. How many a community that dealt unjustly have we shattered and raised up after them another community? And when they saw the consequences of their doings in the shape of their doom, they tried to run away from it. But it was said unto them, run not away, but return to that wherein you delighted and to your dwellings, that you may be questioned as to whence you had obtained so much wealth and the way in which you had dealt with others. They confessed thereupon and said, lo, we were wrongdoers, and this their crying ceased not till we made them reaped corn extinct. And this is taken from these verses 21:11 to 14. The consequences may take their time but are inevitable. The universe was not meant to be without a moral order. We created not the heavens and earth and all that is between them in support. These verses provide a very good motivation and, of course, the reassurance that the laws of Allah are working, and whatever the conditions, even if the things are very bad during any era, if people work towards the system of Deen, then the results will start appearing at some point in time in the future. From rise and fall of nations, when a people choose to take a life in defiance of the moral order, there is actually no time lag between action and its decaying result on their life process. And we should keep that in mind, that when people are doing wrong, their wrong results are getting embedded, and these will appear at some point in the future. But it may take some time for the effect to be perceptible and to manifest itself in social and economic maladies. Anyone stopping at the maladies in his analysis of the causes of a nation's fall would only be reaching the obvious symptoms, but not the root cause, the ungodly way of life. The symptoms can be suppressed without curing the real disease. This would be inviting eruption of the disease in other and more dangerous forms. And we have seen it even on physical side, that if people keep doing something wrong, like smoking cigarette or not taking care of their health, then the ill effects show up at some point in time in the future. The Quran, taking a comprehensive view of life, calls for a radical cure, that is a change of heart and a new orientation. When this change is brought about, the symptoms start disappearing. The only cure for social ills is a return to the path of righteousness and rectitude. The Quran designates the law of requital as the Sunnah of Allah, the uniform way in which He deals with the world in its physical and moral aspects. Sunnah implies order, uniformity, and consistency. It is the expression of Allah's rationally directed will. And this is taken from Islam, a challenge to religion. Another excerpt from Islam, a challenge to religion. Several verses of the Quran throw light on the gradual decline of a nation. We are told that, as already stated, it is the upper stratum of society that is the first to be infected with wickedness. Statesmen and leaders of thought succumb to the allurement of false idols and values. They think that scientific knowledge and technology will make them the masters of the world. They consider absolute values as figments of imagination. The creation of the minds of visionaries, they shut their eyes to the hidden riches of the human mind and glorify that which man has in common with the animals. Their distorted vision of life is adopted by their followers. The infection spreads downwards until the whole society is contaminated. Have you not seen those who gave the bounty of Allah in exchange for thanklessness and led their people to the abode of perdition, that is hell? They are exposed thereto a hopeless end. And this is from Surah Ibrahim, verse 28 and 29. Last verse of today's presentation, 17:105, two important aspects of the Quran. وَبِالْحَقِّ أَنزَلْنَهُ وَبِالْحَقِّ نَزَلَ وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا مُبَشِّرًا وَنَذِيرًا. In line with that same promise, we have now sent down this Quran with al-Haqq, and it has reached you with Haqq, i.e. that Quran which has reached the people is the same one which Allah had sent down with Haqq. The duty of the messenger who has brought this Quran is that he should inform the people how abundant will be the prosperities of life that will be bestowed by treading according to it, and what kinds of destructions will descend from contravening it. Hence, there is another opportunity for reformation for Bani Israel. If they will accept this Quran as the code of life, then the punishment of humiliation and disgrace on them will come to an end. And this part of the meanings is related to what we have discussed earlier. A few more reflections on this verse. After briefly outlining the example of Bani Israel and their fate from the past, the Quran has stated to us the importance of the Quran, i.e. the universe is created bil haqq, and the book of Allah provides all that is required to live this life successfully under its guidance. And this is an important point because al-haqq means what leads to constructive results. And there are meant to be constructive results if people are following laws of Allah. And since people do not follow laws of Allah, as a result, we are seeing batil everywhere. So that is why Quran says that follow haqq, which is the Quranic value system, and then see how your world will be transformed into prosperous and happy life, which is free from all kinds of fear and huzn. The first part of the verse states, وَبِالْحَقِّ أَنزَلْنَهُ وَبِالْحَقِّ نَزَلَ. We have sent this down with haqq, i.e. to be able to produce constructive results, but this will only happen if a Jamaat takes on this challenge and strives on this path. And the book has come down as haqq means it has descended as haqq with haqq contained within its folds. So it is twice used, indicating to us that through and through this book has reached you through haqq. Total and complete haqq in every respect. If it is followed as directed, then it will transform the human psyche by absorbing the full importance of al-haqq. This transformation will be able to do what the messenger Musa and his companions accomplished against Pharaoh and his hosts. The same is applicable to any Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen in any time and era. Now continuing on this verse, the verse concludes with two important aspects of sharing the message of the Quran, where the messenger is instructed to, i.e. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا مُبَشِّرًا وَنَذِيرًا. We sent you but to give glad tidings and to warn. This aspect is noted in a number of other verses in the Quran. These two aspects provide guidance to us too, as students of the Quran, since human accountability is functioning 24/7 as part of the functioning of the law of requital. Hence, we all need to be aware of making the correct choices in life. The warning is about not going outside the domain of the permanent values, otherwise we will suffer with the evil effects of our deeds. When we also warn others, it becomes part of our own subconscious, and we remain alert to this in making the right choices in life. If we stay within the sphere of these values, then the positive outcomes of our right choices will bring positive results in this life as well as in the life of the hereafter. On the question of destiny, what I've done over here is I've quoted another excerpt which I thought is related to what we are discussing. In the Quran scale, destiny is not synonymous with necessity or fatality as they generally call it. It only denotes the range and reach of his capacities. It indicates in what directions he can go. How far he can go is determined by his destiny. How far he will go depends on himself alone. And we have seen that through these presentations, for example, the breadth of our vision is increasing. And what we did not know previously, now we know it quite well. Allah does not dictate to man what objective he should have. He just gives him the helping hand in his efforts to attain the goal he has set for himself. The physical world is subject to inflexible laws which reflect the divine will in its aspect of Khalq. Amr is the source of moral laws which have meaning for and are obligatory on only a free self. By acting in conformity with the Amr, man creates values and appropriates them. When he dies, man does not shed the values he has realized during his earthly life. They are carried over and remain an integral part of the self. Because whatever the man has made as an effort after acquiring Iman, that is what he becomes. So these things become part of his self, fitting it to function on the different plane of existence which it has entered. Values are imperishable. Allah not only guards and protects, but enhances them for the benefit of the ego which has produced them through its own efforts. And that is important, that we have to make efforts. Nothing is given to us on plate. And this is taken from Islam, a challenge to religion. Now, finally, few points of interest from today's talk. We may have noticed that the events in the land of Pharaoh were moving imperceptibly for years and years, and he had faced no issues from either his own people or Bani Israel. Bani Israel, despite suffering and having some remnants of the book of Allah with them, had not thought of going against Pharaoh. At this juncture, the messenger Musa appears with his brother and rekindles the pure message of Wahi. And that is something very interesting to note, that everything was going hunky-dory. There was no problem for Pharaoh and things were quiet. And suddenly the messenger appears on the scene and he conveys the message of Allah to Pharaoh, and things started to accelerate. And there is a great lesson for us as of today in today's world, that if things keep on going the way these are, unless people who become mu'mineen and then rise, things will not accelerate. Things will go slowly, and law of requital will probably take centuries more to bring any change. Events start to move slowly, initially with a frank and calm exchange with Pharaoh and his cohorts. Pharaoh is initially dismissive and only reacts when he sees that in a short period of time, the public is responding to the guidance of Wahi. Because when the messenger arrived and he started giving the message of Allah, then it was not only directed against Pharaoh, but he was also meeting common people around, and gradually people were becoming convinced and were unhappy with their existing state of affairs, and their minds, their psyche started to change. This alarms Pharaoh, and he starts to feel threatened by this potential change in the psyche of the people under his tyrannical rule. Because previously people were just saying that this is fait accompli, this is the way the life is supposed to be, and they accepted and kept quiet. And we can see the events around us in the world, that where things are now moving faster. The messenger Musa and his brother remains firmly on his path and continues to confront Pharaoh with his evil deeds, the evidence for which was showing up in different signs. This process took place over a number of years. And from these verses, if one does not cross-reference these verses with other verses of Bani Israel, one gets an impression as if things moved immediately. Pharaoh got warned adequately, both verbally as well as through various signs, but he refused to alter his path. Then the time arrived when he needed to be eliminated from the scene as per the law of requital of Allah. And that is a very important point for us as students of the Quran. Unless a Jamaat rises up and forms itself and keeps doing in the light of Wahi what it is supposed to do after acquiring Iman, things will not change at a higher pace. Things will keep going on a normal pace, and normal whatever happens over a long period of time, then one nation takes over another nation. But once a Jamaat-e-Momineen intervenes, then things will rise in any particular land and changes take place far more rapidly. So if we don't want a world of, say, from now 100 to 150 years, where there is no injustice in the world, then people have to start doing things now in the light of Wahi of Allah. The point for us to note is that the pace of the law of requital increases when a Jamaat-e-Momineen emerges on the scene of the human world. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.